What is a force majeure clause and how does it apply to your lease? Hi, I'm Michael Golden with Lease Review, and today we're going to go over exactly what a force majeure clause is and how it applies to you. Force majeure is a clause that's found in many contracts, not just commercial real estate leases. It literally means superior force and is a French term. We thought it was Latin, but we won't get into why here. A force majeure clause will typically excuse the timely performance of either the tenant or the landlord for actions and events that occur beyond the reasonable control of either party. So when would a force majeure clause actually be invoked? Let's use a real-world scenario of a doctor that's letting a landlord develop and construct an office from the ground up. The doctor's branching off from an existing practice, so they need ample time to notify all of their existing patients of the move. They need to procure insurance, they need to hire and train staff, and everything else that goes into opening a new business. Because of all these things that don't happen overnight, the doctor needs ample notice for when their open for business date's going to be. So they insist on a hard deadline for when the construction must be complete. The landlord, on the other hand, lives in the Gulf Coast and is developing the property on the Gulf Coast, an area prone to hurricanes every single year. Because of this, the landlord insists on language, such as a force majeure clause, that excuses its timely performance of the hard opening date for items beyond the reasonable control, such as hurricanes. Okay, so obviously, hurricane strikes, delays performance of the landlord because they can't procure materials. Sometimes the infrastructure can be damaged with the major hurricane. Labor is very hard to find, etc. So what happens? Unfortunately, the tenant's out of luck in this case and hopefully procured insurance on their end to protect against something like this, such as loss of business insurance. What's the line between force majeure and an ordinary predictable event? As with most concepts of law, there's no bright line answer. Sorry. In the previous example about a major hurricane that strikes and prevents the general contractor from procuring labor or materials or maybe damaging infrastructure, this would certainly excuse the landlord's timely performance. But let's say it rained for a week and the general contractor couldn't get anyone to come and install the roof because it was raining and it's dangerous to do that. That's probably not going to get the landlord out of a hard deadline. But let's say then the rain for one straight week also caused a bunch of landslides, which prevented access to the space because it washed away roads. Now we're getting closer to something beyond the landlord's reasonable control, or something that wasn't reasonably predictable. As you can see, it's highly fact-specific, and it depends on what the language in your lease says and the facts of the specific case at hand. We don't want you to think force majeure clauses are only used in those cases involving the weather. They can also be used in lockouts, strikes, wars, acts of terrorism, or anything beyond the reasonable control of one of the parties involved. Just a note of caution, a force majeure clause does not actually excuse the performance of one of the parties, but just the timely performance. We're sure there's an example that it would just excuse the performance overall, but for the most part, we're just excusing the timely performance of something. In the previous example, the construction deadline for the doctor's office. How long might that actually delay the construction? It really depends on the specific circumstances. A major hurricane can knock out power to the city for weeks at a time, depending on how quickly they can get the infrastructure back up and running. So it really just depends on the facts of each specific case. A force majeure clause is definitely a clause that you want in your commercial lease because it's something that excuses your performance for items outside your reasonable control. If you'd like for us to review your lease, please visit us at lease-review.com. Happy lease reviewing.